Hi, welcome to Mallet TV. I'm Henry Perkins, and I'll be your host. From my left to my right is Matt McCauley, a member of the United Alabama Project, Justin Thompson, a hopeful presidential SGA candidate for last week who did not win, and Will Gonzalez, a representative of the Blackburn Institute here on campus. Tonight we're going to be talking about the SGA, machine politics, and campus unity as a whole. What do you guys think about campus unity as a whole? Do we have that? Is that a real thing? We have Sodell now that's trying to bring people together. We got UA Blends, that's a whole new thing trying to bring people together. But like right now, we don't have any Greek members in this room here to engage in this discussion with us. So obviously, we have to recognize our own bias and our own resistance to unity. Will, do you like other people?
At times I've been told that I don't, and I've also been told a lot of other people don't like me. Okay. But I think the best way to address the whole unity thing is what we do when we come to this campus is we instantly put ourselves in our own small little groups. I mean, we're perfect examples of it here. You're in Mallet, I'm in Blunt, you're a regular student, and you're in your smaller off-campus fraternity. And what we do is we identify with those groups over as being a UA student. Like when I meet someone for the first time, I'm never like, hey, I'm a UA student, I'm in Blunt, or this is my distinction. And we get with all these like-minded people, and that's what causes all these fractures on campus. Yeah. Which is why we make all these fake groups to put perfume on crap, and it never really seems to fix anything.
No. Well, I mean, do we want it to be fixed? Justin, you ran on a platform of unity. Would you like to speak on that for a second?
Absolutely. I think we just got to get to a point where everyone on this campus feels that they're at home. I think right now we've just got students, like Will said, where they're getting divided into these factions, and they're just they don't feel like if they don't have a connection with them, they don't feel like they can be their friend. They don't feel like that's a fellow UA student with them. And I just think that there's so many issues right now with like different people being discriminatory towards others, and I think it creates a feeling of not being at home. And if you can't make this campus your home, you're not going to feel like you're a united front.
Yeah. And I would interject and say, I think we have to recognize that disunity is not unique to this campus. It's certainly a societal concern. I think we have particularly interesting dynamics in terms of group dynamics on this campus, particularly when you look at Greek, non-Greek relations. And as you mentioned, I believe, Justin, you're in a smaller fraternity, but we don't have anyone representing, say, maybe like the old row fraternities here, and maybe traditional Greek culture. And I think that's one divide on this campus that has been particularly bitter, I would say, and certainly one that is maybe not necessarily unique to this university, but maybe the manner in which it presents itself is a little unique to this university. And I think that's one degree of disunity that has long been a thorn in the side of the university and probably will continue to be so for some time.
Yeah, my impression has always been that the Greeks don't want to hang out with me. It's last semester, Mallet tried to we invited a bunch of Greek organizations over for dinner, and we had a big barbecue and invited the whole campus over, and there was not a great turnout. None of the fraternities or sororities, old row or the bigger ones, none of them responded to our requests for having friendly dinners. Only our allies came to the big barbecue that we had, and we still have people driving by the building yelling obscenities at us.
Most of the issues that come with disunity are moments when we look at somebody else and we sort of immediately label them as the other.
Well, the South has had a long tradition of otherizing people, as America is aware of. It's the fact that last semester in 2013 we had to have a protest that said, "Hey, we're here to integrate the school finally." It's been around since 1831. Slaves were freed in 1865. Civil rights again, 1965. And still we're having problems with integration down here. It's because we've done such a good job otherizing. Yep.
I mean, I literally just came from the last Senate meeting of the year, and Senator Katie Smith proposed a resolution just for SGA to simply support integration of fraternities and sororities, and it was adamantly shot down by a vote of 26 to 6 to 1. Katie actually said that she wanted to submit it earlier in the year, but she was told by her former sororities machine representative that they didn't want her to.
Let's talk about the machine, actually. This is a good segue. Started 100 years ago, has been controlling SGA elections very successfully on this campus with the exception of 2, I believe.
I think it was 5 or 6.
5 or 6? 5 or 6. 5 or 6 is better than 2. But out of 100, that's not great.
The machine as a method for Greeks to organize in order to express their common interest is not bad in and of itself. Yeah. What's bad is the degree of corruption of the political process and the democratic process that comes about as a result, and the ugly, dirty politics that are born from that.
What is it that makes it so corrupt? Because, like you said, it is that is democracy in action. It's a group of like-minded people all pooling their votes to vote for someone who probably does best represent their interests and their wants.
Essentially, what we're dealing with is a political regime. And a political regime oftentimes seeks to perpetuate itself. So it's made sure that the rules and the norms and the institutions that are in place on this university act in a way as to keep it in power. And I think we've seen this to a degree even with the elections board recently, where there's vagueness in the rules, there's been trouble in terms of how the rules are going to be carried out. And I don't mean to critique the elections board too harshly, but at the same time, I think when we see things right down to one of the very most sort of basic proponents of a democracy, when we talk about elections and voting, if the rules at that level, that sort of basic level, are skewed in one direction, then there's no way to have what we would consider a fair democratic process.
One of my big issues with it is that there's several of these freshmen and sophomore members of these fraternities and sororities that are voting and having someone look over their shoulder while they're voting, so they literally can't feel like they're voting for the right individual.
Do we have a democracy, Will?
I mean, I kind of reject the whole idea of Greek interest as being a thing. You know, it's not a homogenous group. Like the needs of like Beta Theta Pi are completely different from Alpha Sig or from Deke or anything like that. Like they act in a homogenous group and they act like it benefits them all. But what it does is it reinforces their own power structure. It keeps old row above new row. It keeps like the system functioning the way that it should when it doesn't benefit them. A lot of the fraternities would probably be a lot more benefited if the machine were to break or to splinter, because what it does is it maintains control. And I think that shows right there that there's so much of an illusion on this campus of what it does. And it's part of that othering, because the second you criticize the machine, it instantly turns into you are criticizing Greeks.
It's pretty clicked.
I mean, you also see the sororities, which have ballooned or exploded in size, not getting equal representation in SGA. It's not a fair system. It's never been a fair system. It benefits the 5 fraternities we see in front of the stadium. That's about it. Right. But they're so good at spreading this idea that it is Greek interest, and we are Greek when you're not. Because if you've ever looked on Yik Yak, all Greeks don't feel the same way.
Right. When sororities were first introduced into the machine, from my understanding, they were told 1 out of every 10 years there would be a machine female president. Even though that hasn't been the case, 1 out of 10, I don't understand why they think that was a good deal in the first place, because that's not an equal representation. I mean, there's been, out of all the members of SGA this past year on executive, the two people that did the most projects, completed the most new projects, were Allison Montgomery and Brielle Applebaum, women.
I think maybe the question begs to be asked, why then do we not see splintering? Why then do we not see people splitting off from the machine? If it doesn't represent their best interests, then we would expect at a certain point in time to see some degree of splintering, or at least some attempt to splinter.
I think it's just what you're taught. I mean, when you're a girl and you come to this campus, you show up 2 weeks early, you rush, you get in your house, that's where you eat your meals, like that's what socializes you to the university. And when you're told from like the first minute you're on campus, like you're better because you're Greek, or this is us, we are this, like at some point, like that's why you get this like culture of the othering, because you are put in this little like bubble, and like other organizations do it too. Blunt's just as guilty. We do the exact same thing with our freshmen.
Mallet is also kind of guilty.
And you build up this system of like, I'm different.
My concern would once again sort of be, what are people being taught? And as you mentioned earlier, it's what we're taught. And individuals in the machine, if they're taught that political corruption is not only okay, but fostered in a greater community, I mean, they're going to internalize that to a certain degree. Maybe not all of them, but some of them will. And then some of them will go on, and some of them will go into politics, and they'll continue to practice that sort of corruption.
They will be the leaders of our state.
You know, the people that we see in office today were college students not so long ago. And I think some of the things that are maybe not explicitly taught, but sort of implied as this is not only okay, but accepted and will get you somewhere. I think when we do that, the broader based implications of, yeah, it's fine that I have this privilege, and it's fine that I exercise this degree of control, and it's fine that I corrupt the democratic process and don't really live up to the civic virtues that we would consider important in a democratic system. I think people internalize those things, they take them on. I think that's where the greater danger lies.
I mean, I don't really think you can make the case that the machine doesn't benefit the university, because like, look at Senator Shelby. like Senator Shelby built the SEC, and I like nice new things. And the SEC is very nice and very new and is providing so many opportunities to students and helping them better their career prospects. And where did Shelby start? Shelby was here as a Delta Chi, was machine backed, and that's how his journey into politics began. And then when he moved out, he had the support net that was already created through his contacts here, and he pretty much got to where he was because he was at the University of Alabama and was a Delta Chi.
And he's given back.
And
he's
he
got
has
a Shelby
given
Hall
back.
here. He's got a Shelby Hall at Auburn. There's a Shelby Hall at the University of South Alabama in Mobile.
Right, and I'm going to disagree on that a little bit. I mean, I don't think the machine necessarily benefits the university exclusively. I believe that you could certainly have a system that would benefit the university as much. I think if the machine didn't exist, I would still think that there would be people who would be influential, people who would go on and become senators in the state. I mean, if the machine didn't exist, there would still be senators in Alabama.
Yes.
And I mean, it would.
I don't know.
The entire political system wouldn't collapse. So I agree that the machine has benefited the university. I just think that a system could exist without the machine where the university would still benefit as much, and maybe on a less explicit, less obvious level, even more. In terms of maybe a state that would, I mean, Alabama has as a state, and once again, this is me as an outsider, but Alabama has as a state a lot of serious issues in its governance.
Yeah. The way the system's set up right now is it's benefiting a few people who are all meeting in secret and talking about what they're going to do, and then they're imposing their laws on the rest of the state, and those are the same people who learn those lessons from the University of Alabama, and they're maintaining the status quo. Hi, welcome back to Mallet TV. Now we're going to pick up where we left off and talk more about the SGA and the Stephen Keller scandal, what people are calling Kellergate. If someone wants to give us some background on that, I pick Matt.
Okay. Well, the United Alabama Project, which is the organization that I'm president of, is a student-run political advocacy group. One of the things that we offered in this election cycle was an election monitoring service. So we had an email set up where people could send us any sort of elections violations, any information they had, anything along the lines of evidence, I guess I would say. And we received a recording from someone that we knew of Stevie Keller, essentially, who's was a candidate and is now the vice president for student affairs elect, where he admitted to putting together the Students for Experience leadership flyers that we're being handing out and handing them out himself.
We've got one of these flyers right here. Show it to the camera.
And essentially what we did is we sent a copy the evening of the election to the Elections Board, the CW, and Capstone News Now. And Capstone News Now followed up, did some more research, called Stephen Keller, asked him essentially, are these forms going to show up in your financial statement? Because if they're campaign materials, they need to show up in his financial statements. He said they were not going to show up in his financial statements. And under the election rules, if your financial statements are incorrect because you didn't put something on them or you didn't accurately represent something on them or something on those lines, the rules state that you shall be disqualified. And that's essentially what the election board has been deliberating over for the last couple of days.
Okay. Do we have a verdict?
A week or so.
Do we know what's going on?
There are rumors. There are rumors of a verdict, but I mean, there are rumors that a verdict has been made, but not rumors on what that verdict would be.
Okay, fine.
Right.
I mean, what could these flyers have done to affect the campaign? Really, why would this be a bigger deal?
I mean, I believe they did absolutely nothing.
You think they did absolutely nothing?
I mean, Stevie Keller's majority was sizable enough, and there was enough backing, enough groundswell. And if you look at the information that came out later, where Stevie Keller was talking about how he attempted to address Kelly Knox Hall who helps oversee the elections, and tried to talk to her about how he wanted to adjust his campaign finances and how can he do that on the day of, because he knew that the flyers existed, and he cushioned his budget.
Even
wanted to put
Madeline
room in it.
Vaughn, the co-chair of the elections board, said that you should not be accepting materials after 5 p.m. on Monday when your last financial form is due.
But she only has one say on the. That's why the deliberation process has to exist, because Kelly Knox Hall, foreseeably, we don't know because these records aren't public, but advised him that it was okay.
Keller's election was by far the closest of all of them. It was like a 1,600 vote differential rather than the other ones, which were 2,600, 3,000.
And I think what brings up a good point. Did this one particular flyer make up those 1,600 votes?
Well, if you cut it in half, it's 800 because it's
Right.
800 flip
I'm going to
votes.
say no. We, as the United Alabama Project, turned over all of the evidence that we got. So if we got any evidence from anybody who was like, I'm willing to turn this over to you and have you turn it over to the board, we did. Our job is not to weigh in on whether or not we think someone's guilty. In fact, I've given our email to Capstone News now. It simply says, we have this recording, we think that there may be some violations concerning ethics or finance here, and we give it to the election board. It's the elections board job to investigate. So whatever decision they come to, it's the decision they come to. Our concern was more that in 2012 elections, the Advance UA was a ticket that sort of ran together, and one of the things they went to the elections board about and said was that if they were going to do group campaigning, a flyer would show up on all of their financial statements. So they all paid the full amount for the flyers. They didn't split it; they all paid the full amount. And essentially, my thought was, and my concern was, that the rules need to be fair, and that's what we've advocated for the entire time. They need to be fair for all candidates. So if these individuals all ran as a ticket or did any kind of group campaigning, this should have showed up on all of their financial statements, in my opinion. At the same time, it's not our place to say whether or not that's a disqualifying factor or whether or not those people even did group campaigning. I think one of the issues that we're going to have to address moving forward is elections reform, because the rules are very vague. And it's not very clear if I'm a student and I decide that I don't like these individuals, can I go print out a flyer with their name on them and then distribute it to everybody and get them disqualified? And the election rules are a little, they're not hugely vague, but they are too vague as it stands for that sort of infraction.
I know that the flyer that myself and some other Malleteers and independent students made, which I have one of those right here, show it to the camera, stirred up a little bit of controversy, and we got contacted by the elections board, and they said they're going to bring us in for a trial or something like that based on us violating some rules, because apparently all students are members of the SGA. If you're a student at the university, you're a member of the SGA and have to follow some rules or something. They never followed up on that because I guess this Keller thing blew up instead in lieu of ours. But we did the thing where we put all the candidates' names on a list. We said vote for these people. Well, it doesn't say explicitly. It basically says vote for those people. Were we breaking the same rules?
I think that's one of the issues is, are you breaking the rules? I don't know. I think that's one of the things the rules are vague on. In terms of, the flyers are similar. They're not exactly the same. There's some significant differences. The one thing that is different is you'll notice the other people on this flyer not being investigated. There's no evidence that that any of these people said that they
wanted to be a
part
of
or we're handing them out.
Right, and I think that's true of the individual on this flyer. An unnamed source that we speak with on the elections board has said that one of the reason that Mallet hasn't been contacted is there's been a large influx of complaints this year generally. So the elections board is having a little trouble keeping up with all of them, and has sort of tabled certain things and moved certain things in terms of what they consider to be more immediate priorities.
Yeah.
And I think we could look at that and say that it is both sort of a good and a bad thing. One, we're getting more reporting, which is a good thing. And two, the fact that there's a lot of complaints in an election in terms of election.
That's kind of cool. That's kind of cool.
Right. But it's also maybe not a great thing that we're seeing this many complaints in the first place. So I think it could be up for debate there.
Oh, I feel like there could have been this many complaints any year before this. It's just this first year. I feel like the culture on campus is starting to turn more towards fairer democracy.
Kind of jumping back to that point, though, I kind of disagree with Matt's assumption on these flyers, because I think what Stevie Keller did is he contacted Kelly Knox Hall right when he was unsure if he was violating campaign ruals or not.
He did it the next morning.
And he wanted to make sure that he thought what he did was fine. Meanwhile, this flyer was taken. This one was taken in a where this is being done to benefit these candidates. We know this is probably not in the purview of the rules, and nobody tried to check with the ambiguousness of the rules. Where Keller tried to work within the system.
Keller was a candidate, and we were acting independently.
I, Elliot, Chris, or Cortland had no part in passing these out in any aspect of it. While they had their candidates passing these out, which is obviously their campaigning. I got one of these at 7 a.m. on Monday morning when I went to Lloyd. Someone ran out of a bus and handed me one.
But I think more importantly here, and this is the thing we need to sort of address, is that the story broke before the moment when Keller emailed the elections board. Now, I can't speak to what's in Stephen Keller's mind or what's in anyone in the elections board's mind. I don't know whether he saw the story first and then sent the email, or sent the email entirely not knowing that there was a story at all. I don't know that, and once again, it's not my place or the place of the United Alabama Project to say whether or not there's guilt there or what the degree of punishment should be. But at the same time, this is the only instance that we received. We received no instance for any of these other candidates saying that they have participated in either of these flyers. So that's the reason I think Stephen Keller is at the heart and center of this, not that it's Stephen Keller. Not that it's a machine candidate, not that it's student affairs, a contested election.
But there was evidence.
This is where the evidence
was.
To
violations. Okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, alleged violations.
Alleged violations.
Right.
Nothing's proven. Well, something might be proven, actually.
Well, yeah, I mean,
we don't know.
We will wait and see.
He pretty much implicated himself, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Closing statements. So what do you think, what do you see the future of SGA elections at this school being? What do you see happening next year, the year after that, the year after that? Are we going to beat the machine? Is someone else going to beat the machine? Is the machine going to say, no, guys, come on, we're fine, and status quo is going to maintain? What do you foresee?
I think that culture is changing. I think it's not going to be something that happens overnight, but I think that people are getting, maybe not people are getting less apathetic, but there's less people being apathetic about it. I think you're rounding these people up, and I think it showed with myself receiving almost 4,000 votes this year compared to David Wilson 2 years ago receiving less than 3,000. I mean, going up 1,000 in the next contested election is a lot. And if we can continue on that right track, I think we're going to get to a point where we can have a more fair democracy. And I think if we can get a consistent, maybe a machine win here, a non-machine win here, it'll get to the point where it's actually like, who is the better candidate rather than who did the machine endorse.
Yes.
I mean, I think the machine's going to continue as business as usual. I don't necessarily see all that much wrong with that. Because, I mean, the CW endorsed just as many of these candidates. I think there was about 2 that were different. Because at the heart of it, like, those candidates are the quote-unquote experienced ones. They were brought into the system. They've been mentored in the system. And it generally serves us pretty well where we normally get pretty good leaders. Matt Calderon
Taylor's a good leader.
Matt Calderon was a very good SGA president, and he served his office very well. Neither was distinction.
I voted for Matt Calderon. I mean,
I did as well.
I agree with you, and I think in times you are going to get leadership from the machine that is good leadership. The Greeks are a very involved and active community on this campus. And once again, not all Greeks are the same, but once again, you are going to get good leadership from that section of campus.
President Taylor skipped a 63-year-old ceremony with Auburn to go to a job interview.
Right, and I'm not gonna talk about specific. I'd rather avoid specific people here. I think the issue is that there may be a lack of strong independent leadership to the degree that it's not always fostered by the current system. Predicting the future is something that is usually sort of an exercise in just futility in and of itself. But I don't know what we're going to see. I think this has been an interesting year. I think there's been some unexpected things that happened. But I think if we're going to look forward, I think we're going to look at change. I don't know if it necessarily it's going to be the end of the machine. I don't think that's the way we're going to see this. And I don't even think that's what we should be advocating for. I don't think that's what we should be looking for. We should be looking for is a more fair system in every way, shape, or form. These candidates should not be allowed to do anything that these candidates aren't allowed to do, or vice versa. And I think that's what we need to aim for. We need to aim for democratic principles, regardless of how we aim for them. And if the machine endorses democratic principles, which they do sometimes, then
that's great. I'm going to cut you off there. Thank you all for tuning in. This has been Mallet TV. I'm your host, Henry Perkins, and there's a quote I'm supposed to say. Mallet TV, developing leadership through self-government. I think that's a Mallet quote, but now it applies to TV also. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for joining me here. Let's shake hands while the credits roll.